see, I've got it sitting up on its end, and I fitted the key into the joint, and it's fitting nice and tight around, as you can see. So this is just dry right now. And the next stage will be to plaster it all together. Okay, so as you can see, just so that there's proof that in fact it was fitting together with the piece, there it is. And as you can see, there's the reverse side, nicely cleaned out. And there's lots of little details that I do, like, I don't know if you can see, but I used a tooth chisel on the inside to create extra traction for when I plaster. All those little details, I think, really matter. And as you can see, I've just like on the lower section, I went around with a tooth chisel, and I cleaned it back in a shy of the face. So I took all the high points off, and that way, not you have clean stone to bond with your mix, but it also cuts down on the restrictions, especially when you've got an uneven crack. It's the high points that will force the stone one way or the other. And it was when I fitted it the first time, it was this one little spot that I hadn't done yet, and that was the spot that caused the crack not to line up. Just a tiny little spot right here. So it's this is the reason why I talk about removing all the high points, because they prevent you from ever getting it back into proper alignment. And that's the In the last episode, we left off with the with me getting prepared to put this leg together. So as you can see now that it's together, I have one remaining issue, and that is color matching the plaster. And it's a little bit of trial and error, because plaster is obviously so white and stone is not. So that's something that you have to experiment with a little bit. And even a seasoned professional such as myself, it really is down to color combinations, intensity, and the finish. And it's all usually best to work your way into that, and not be so concerned about matching it when you put the piece together. But that's something that can always be addressed later on. Piecing of this has gone really well, and I'm really happy with that. And you can see that I've got a few other areas here. There's some plug holes here that was probably from some kind of an internal frame, or something to do with some kind of an insert in its previous life. I'm not sure what it was, but there's two corresponding holes, one on each side of the leg, and this would have been the firebox side. So whatever that was, it's something that I'll have to fill. But it just speaks of the layers of the history of the piece, such as this. So as you can see on this, on the reverse side, I filled in with the initial filling of this big trench that was here, and I've done that with the a grit plaster mix with the crushed stone dust that I was talking about in the previous video. And it's created a nice texture, but obviously there's still some topping up that has to be done. So I'll still continue to build that up until it's nice and flush, and I'll work that in. I wanted to let it dry a bit, so it's been drying now for about, I guess, about 3 days, and there's a lot of moisture that's been absorbed into the stone. So I'll let that dry out a bit more. And one of the nice things about this process is it also helps to pull out the salts that were contaminated in the stone, because the fire brick that had been inserted into this was set with a fire clay, which contains a lot of salts, and that gets absorbed into the stone. So that'll come out as in a form of efflorescence. And I've already, after a couple of days, it came back and it was all fuzzy. It had grown little crystalline hairs on the surface, and that's called efflorescence. So I've wiped that off, and I'll let that continue to pull out, and it'll form some kind of an orange stain on the other side, and then I'll gently clean that off and then let it breathe out a bit more, and eventually it stabilizes. But that's all part of the process of stabilizing the stone, pulling out the old stains, and patching all at the same time. So it's like a multi-stage process. In the end, I think it's going to be very convincing. The one last challenge is getting the right color match. As you can see, this big chip here, I've patched it with a textured plaster. And with this patch, I actually added a little bit of fine sand to it, just to because this has got a very sandy texture to it, this limestone. It's I can't really say it's sandy so much as a granular crystalline texture to it. Different limestones have different qualities, and it's always about trying to match the density and the texture of the surrounding stone, so that it's not too obvious that it's a patch. Once I get the color correct, then it shouldn't be obvious at all, and that's the whole point. Is that obviously you don't want this big glaring blob of something that's been clearly patched. Otherwise, it's very unsightly. So you want it to be uh, not eye catching, right? So in the end, when you look at it, all you're looking at is the lines of the piece, not the patchwork repair that's been put onto it. I think that's the balance that is always the dilemma of any repair job. Is at what point do you decide is is not too sneaky, so as to confuse original material with the new repair, versus something that is actually pleasing to the eye. That's the balance that one tries to strike when you're doing any kind of sympathetic repair. Now on the other leg, I think that I showed in the very first video when I was introducing this project. This piece, the other leg had the base attached, but it was still pinned, and I hadn't removed the pin. Through a lot of effort, I ended up having to hacksaw off the steel pin. As you can see, it was quite a hefty diameter, and yeah, eventually it separated, but it took me some time, and obviously it's left behind a great big hole that still has quite a bit of epoxy in it. I won't mess around with that too much. And fortunately, there was a lot of fracturing and spalling from both combination of I think its previous life, and then also the repairs that had been done. So I've stabilized those as best as I can, and now I have the dilemma about exactly how do I go about securing this base. And I'd say that probably the safest approach, because there's a lot of compromised stone here and not a lot of substance left, uh, I think the safest approach is probably going to be to use a polyester resin. So it's the next day, and I'm not sure if you can see this, but this is the repair of the broken leg. And what I've been doing is I've been topping up the plaster repair with a bit of acrylic paint, and just doing it in I custom mixed a color that worked with the stone. combination of yellow, red, and brown, kind of catch the orange tones. And I've just layered it on. And what I just use is, if you don't have a paintbrush, what you can use is a skewer. So what I've done is I've just taken a bamboo skewer, and I've sharpened, or I've split the end. I don't know if you can see that, but I've split the end into kind of like a brush. So you just you just use a knife and just kind of open it up and split it so that it draws up water and paint, and you can use that like a brush. And then I've just been dabbing on the paint, and then a mixture of that and a bit of water, and it works quite well. It allows you to get the apply whatever you want in a very focused area. So if you don't have a brush, you can use a piece of wood, a stick, and it's a famous old technique. And when you're done with it, you can just toss it aside. It's not nearly as expensive as a brush. I was just reviewing this and cleaning off some of the mortar on the top of this the second leg here, and I discovered that there's these hairline fractures. I don't know if you can see them. There's actually a couple of them, and so what I've decided to do in order to prevent these from opening up, because they run down at least this far down the leg, actually probably even further. Actually, you know what? I'm actually seeing it on the video even better. Looks like it runs full length. So I'm going to carve in some butterfly uh, notches, or pieces to secure these and keep them from spreading. So I'll carve those in. And I'm currently debating, I can either do it with stone, do it with lead. So that it's two different options. Of course, the stone requires having to shape two pieces, right? So you have to carve it in to a certain depth, and then you have to make up a mirror image of that and fit it in nice and tight. So I'm going to do two of those, and I think that will help these. This will prevent this crack from ever spreading and opening up. And it's the safest way to deal with the situation, because this, if it was just on the face, it wouldn't be so much of an issue. But the fact that it runs right through tells me that there's a weakness running the full length of this piece. And this might very well have been there since the beginning. This might not be anything new, but because I don't know the history of this piece, I have to assume that it's a potential issue. The assessment of a piece. You discover things as you peel off the layers, and then you come up with a remedy as you go. So one of the techniques that can be used in sensitive areas, because of the fracture in the stone, I want to avoid coming in with a chisel too much, forcing an outward force. So when you're dropping in a sinking, and you want to avoid an outward force, you can come down on it in a downwards force using a punch, and you can so you get a lot of control over the amount of force, and you just gently caress the stone out of the sinking without directing the force outwards and compromising the stone or possibly running the fracture further down. So you can you get a lot of control over that. You can just gently press it off. It takes a little bit longer, but it guarantees that you're not going to agitate the fracture any further. I'll discuss this technique of coming down in a vertical motion using a punch, because there's a lot of other specialized techniques you can use this same method. You can use a punch in a vertical manner and you get excellent results, but in this case, for this application, it's invaluable for dropping the waste into a sinking without providing unnecessary force. A lot of people might be wondering why I'm not using a pneumatic chisel or some other fancy doodad. And when you're dealing with compromised materials such as this with the fracture, it's important to remember that any unnecessary vibrations introduced to a stone can compromise it. Somewhere I've got some other points that are much smaller than this, some punches that are very small, and let's see if I can find those, because that's really handy for probing the edges. And you can actually get away without using any square chisel at all if you've got the right punches. It's always important to have a good variety of punches. This one is a little chunky for its use, but it works as long as it's got a nice sharp point. So it can't hurt to once in a while just keen up the very tip of it. That allows you to get more of an accurate force. Basically, you're just stunning the surface and you slowly work your way down. It bounces the stone chips off as you go. You just kind of get it into a rhythm. So, if you are enjoying this kind of content, you could give me a thumbs up and maybe even subscribe to my channel. I know it's not for everybody, but it's I think it's interesting for people that have the same kind of interests that I do, and so I'm sharing this bit of information. But if you are interested in other types of content, I have lots of other types of content on my channel, so you can always go back and give it a bit of look before you've made your mind up. But I appreciate any kind of support you can give me. Thanks. think a lot of these fractures in the stone are a result of long-term exposure to intense heat. Because it's at the top of the leg, this bed would be the junction between the bridge and the legs. So you can imagine the heat billowing up and getting trapped on the underside of the mantle. So I have to believe that a lot of these fractures and recrystallization of the stone is a result of intense heat, and that it's probably not the natural state of the stone, because it seems a bit odd that they would have quarried stone that's so heavily fractured. Typically they wouldn't have even bothered cutting stone that had that tendency. So I have to believe that this is all product of its environment, of what it's been exposed to over the centuries. But because I'm not completely familiar with this type of stone, I'm just guessing. Sometimes with fireplace mantles, depending on the airflow in the room, if you have a window or a door on one side of the room, you'll have a tendency to draw the heat off to one side. So it's not uncommon to see heat damage that's not uniform. So you might have one side of the fireplace that'll be all smoky, or one side that'll be particularly damaged by heat, but on the other side relatively without damage. And that's just simply because of the way that the air was flowing in the room. Anybody that's ever studied or looked at a fire in a fireplace, they'll see the smoke and the heat gets drawn towards openings. So if there's a door or a window, that'll be a secondary, it almost forms like a secondary chimney. And that can cause uneven damage or weathering of the stone. So I'm going to leave this video off at this point, and I'm going to continue on with this. I think that this is enough for this video. But as you can see, the progress is coming along at a rapid pace now, and I'm very happy with the results. So the next video, we're going to see that much more, and I'll see if I can drag the bridge out, because and we can take a look at the bridge and see what needs to be done with that in the next video. So that's something to look forward to. And thanks for watching. So see you next time. Bye.